We've got people here that can talk all about the details of what's going on in the world and here at the Expo. But I just want to bring it back to the personal. Because we had a prominent journalist, it looks like, tortured to death by a regime in an embassy. And we've got the leader of the free world brazenly saying that there would be no repercussions because there was, what was it, Richard?
$110 billion.
$110 billion weapon deal at stake. And it's not brazen to put a price on a human life anymore if that life happens to be a Middle Eastern life. What's brazen is that he just said it, and it's not even hidden anymore. And what he said was true. He said they'll just get it from Russia or somewhere else. It's not just America, is it? There is an arms trade. It's part of capitalism. There is a war industrial complex. And some of us in the world, a lot of us who look like me and have my story as their life story, know that our lives are cheap. And when Donald Trump put that price on a human life, it wasn't just that life that he was talking about. We're talking about the price of oppression for the Saudi people. This was a journalist who was targeted. The message is really clear, and it's chilling. Anyone who criticises that regime can be murdered, tortured to death. It's the price of every bright, young, incredible woman living in Saudi Arabia whose life is reduced to the right to drive. Because those activists are also murdered by that regime. So we live under oppression in certain parts of the world because there's money to be made. And it's not just Saudi Arabia, obviously. I come from Iran, and that's my life story. After one of the greatest popular movements in modern history that actually toppled a dictatorship, my people ended up living under one of the most repressive regimes in modern history, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran, where people are regularly tortured. Socialists, communists, freedom fighters for democracy are dying in mass graves, and did especially in that first decade after the revolution, and that was the backdrop to a bloody war with Saddam Hussein's Iraq, where my childhood memories are filled with people, thousands of people, just an entire population, it felt like, of amputees coming back from war. Children who stopped talking because of shell shock, who had been my friends. So that's our reality, and we learn to accept that nobody cares and that our lives are cheap, our limbs are cheap, our freedom is cheap. It can be priced out. And once we escaped and we came here, and decades later, the world learned that the West had actually armed both sides of that war, had sold weapons to both Saddam and Ayatollah Khomeini while condemning one and supporting the other, and then it turned around and it did the same to Saddam, and we all just were collateral damage in that kind of war for profit. That's who's coming here. It's that industry. It's not Americans or Russians or Kiwis. It's this world of multinational corporations sitting behind a veil. They're unregulated largely. And they're coming here using us as a brokering hub, which actually reminds me, we passed law for the first time, weirdly, to outlaw weapons brokering in New Zealand just a few months ago, which might be something that might apply here. Imagine if we start arresting them. So that will be new. But when we were about to pass that law, I looked at, because we were actually implementing an international treaty against weapons brokering, and I looked at the negotiation speeches, and it was just heartbreaking, because it's not just the Middle East. So it was, South and Central American countries just begging the West to control this trade, because they suffer from gun violence. And the newest little nation in the world, South Sudan, who hasn't ever seen peace, just begging us to just give up that profit so they could have peace. So it is personal, and it means so much every time you hear people in the West actually talking about how your life does matter, how we do need to stop this, how it isn't okay. It means so much. So thank you so much for coming here and for putting your bodies on the line, as I know we all will, if they're allowed to come. Because it does mean a lot. And New Zealand has been that voice on the world stage before, standing up, whether it's against apartheid, whether it's against nuclear arms. We need to get back to that. We need to be that loud voice of what's right on the international stage again, starting by kicking out the Expo, maybe arresting them. But then we have to turn our sights onto what we are doing in the Middle East, which is contributing to a military presence. We're not fighting in the front lines, but we know that we're actually contributing to not only a military presence, but actually war crimes being committed over there. And it's time to stop. It's time to pull out. It's time to look at what we can do. So yes, it is. It's awful. And I remember my dad saying when the Arab Spring was, bubbling up and everyone was excited, and he said, who's behind this? And I said, oh, it's student socialists. They just want to nationalise the oil resource, or I don't know, get better paying jobs. And he said, oh, that's what we thought. It's going to be for oil, and it's going to be for war. So we need to give it up. It's like an addiction. But we do. We need to give up, and we need to pull out, and we go, okay, well, actually the Arab Spring ended up in Syria and Yemen, causing far worse than what the Iran-Iraq war actually did. And it's natural to care, and it's natural to want to stop that, and it's natural, to go, okay, we're going to go over there and fight the bad guys or whatever. But that's actually not working. There's been a proliferation of violence in the Middle East since there has been a military presence, an outside imperialist presence there. So we need to look at what we can do to open up the aid corridors, to help them build infrastructure, to return to stability so people can actually go off and study and get jobs and, have homes and have hospitals. That's what people on the ground care about. They don't actually want more and more and more people protecting them against ISIS with guns. They don't have roads, and they don't have medicine. So that's what we need to focus on. We need to say no to our so-called allies. We need to say to our friends that we won't let them continue to profit from harm. So it's personal, and I personally thank you from the very bottom of my refugee heart, because this is what refugees are made of. Thank you.